Hello, everyone. My name is Florian, and I'm thrilled to guide you through the workshop today, which is titled Work-Life Balance in a Thriving Consulting Career. And this is a workshop I'm running in collaboration with PrepLounge. And what you're now seeing is actually a re-recording of yesterday's session because we experienced some technical issues. Now, I would like to kick it off by briefly introducing myself and give a bit of background why I'm here today and essentially focus on what I'm doing. So I was a consultant with McKinsey company for 5 years and left at the beginning of 2020. And the reason why I started helping people getting into consulting is that when I was running through the recruitment cycles twice, once for internships and once for full-time positions, I actually never felt super well prepared. I read all the materials, I practiced a lot, but some cases went well, others didn't go that well. And I never really could put my finger on it, why that actually is the case. And when I eventually got into McKinsey, I already had in the back of my mind the goal of changing this landscape a bit and kind of rethink how people approach interviews, consulting applications, etc. And also supported by the experiences I had in McKinsey, I felt like that I could contribute to the space and come up with a new approach to case interviews, which then also led me to found Strategy Case in 2020. And since then, I was super fortunate to help really a lot of people in this space. I've reached more than 1 million applicants and new hires over the time and authored 2 books as well. But one thing that I soon found out was that it's one thing to get into consulting firms. It's very tricky, of course, but the actual challenge starts afterwards. And when I was discussing this with my coaches, I really saw the need that I would expand my offering and also help them get a good career in consulting, make sure it's a sustainable career and something they can do for a long time and not just for 1 or 2 years. And that is also already going into today's topic, which is the work-life balance in consulting. And if we think about that, I know this is a recorded session, but I'm still very curious to hear your experience and read through these questions. If you can answer them or if you want to provide your input, you can always DM me directly on PrepLaunch. Now, let's dive right in. Why is it important to have a good work-life balance? I think this is a pretty obvious question. Of course, it is important. And the reason is that if you have a bad work-life balance, this has a negative impact on all aspects of life, not just on the job. Yes, people with a bad work-life balance, they leave earlier, they have poor job performance, so they might be asked to leave, but also it has a significant impact on their mental health, on their physical health. And after all, we're not on this planet to just work. We are here to enjoy what we're doing. And if you really want to have a meaningful life that you could look back on, it's something you need to take care of. And the next question, of course, then is it actually possible to have a work-life balance or a good work-life balance in consulting? Because the thing is, there will be a lot of elevated expectations. So clients expect a lot, the leadership teams expect a lot, and this will lead to quite intense work cycles. So usually consulting projects are quite short. You will always run after some deadlines. Once you have one deadline finished, you're already working for the next deadline. Yeah, this leads to long work hours and it's a constant race against the time, essentially. And this leads to the fact that you continuously need to adapt. So you need to adapt travel schedules. You will need to adapt to new clients every couple of weeks. You need to adapt to new teams. There will always be a professional development need. And this makes it, of course, a very exhausting profession. And one thing I want to highlight here is that this doesn't really change over time. So most consulting firms have what is, I think, called the continuous stretch. So as soon as you are able to perform well in one function or in one responsibility, you're automatically asked to take on the next responsibility in the next function. So someone that is in the industry for, let's say, 5 years will still have the same struggle as someone who just started. It's just a different kind of struggle and different responsibilities. Now, with all that being said, I still believe it's possible to have a relatively okay work-life balance. Of course, it's not a 9-to-5 job, and it involves a lot of careful planning and execution. And that's what we're going to look at today in this workshop with 4 steps. So the first step, what I want to talk about briefly, because it kind of goes over the scope of this workshop, is how you can have a strong performance and how the strong performance actually improves your personal freedom and work-life balance. The second thing I want to talk about is how you can employ short-term measures that can enhance your work-life balance quickly and on the spot, essentially. Then we will look at long-term options. So what can you do to have a long-term career? And lastly, I want to talk about measures out of a crisis. So sometimes you might experience certain crises in your consulting life, which is pretty normal. And there's a couple of things that you can do to manage this. At the end, of course, since this is recorded, there will not be a Q&A, but as I mentioned, you can always send me messages on PrepLounge and contact me directly if you want to know something, if you want tailored advice for your current situation, etc. And one thing I want to highlight again, some of the things we're going to talk about, for sure you've heard before. Some you might have not heard before, but the goal of this workshop is to pick the elements that can work for you and apply them, maybe test it out and feel if this is something that contributes to a positive work-life balance, if it has no impact, if it's an additional burden. But I can guarantee you there's measures in there for everyone and some tips and tricks that can make a consulting career both more pleasurable, more exciting, but also more sustainable. Now, having said that, let's get into the first topic. How can you have a strong performance? One thing I noticed very early in my career is that the quality of your work, so what you're doing, the output you produce, the way you interact with clients, with your teams, the quality of your analysis, for instance, has a significant impact on your work-life balance. And the reason for this is pretty simple. The better you are, the more people put trust in you and the more freedom and autonomy you actually get. And that is something that is worth a lot, because this freedom, on the other hand, is able to buy you flexibility, for instance, working from home one more day of the week, changing your travel schedule, etc. If you're a person who's struggling in your current firm or current environment and you don't really meet your performance goals, it's also very difficult to ask for more flexibility and take matters into your own hands. So what can you do here? And I think the core thing is, since most consulting firms focus on a strength-based feedback culture, is to really identify your strengths individually by getting the right feedback, asking for the right feedback, and then honing in on them, making sure you develop those strengths. Becoming known for a specific thing and a specific skill will automatically create a lot of attraction for you, for your placement on projects. And also it will give you confidence. And if you have the confidence and you produce great work, this will allow you greater autonomy. You will not be micromanaged, etc. All these things that have a negative impact on your work-life balance. Of course, the outcome, if you focus on your strength, is you will deliver quality work. And if you deliver quality work, we are again in this positive feedback cycle. One thing that you should also do, what a lot of young and junior consultants don't do enough, is to properly utilize your team and their support staff. You're not a lonely warrior. You should actually work with the team and all the support functions in your firm. This will A, improve the quality of your work, and B, also potentially reduce the time that you have to deal with certain things. For instance, the big consulting firms, they usually have slide production departments that can take away a lot of the work. They have departments for analytics, all those sorts of things, which could lead to 1 or 2 hours less work at the end of a day. And of course, since they're doing this professionally, they will also have contribute to the quality of your slides and visuals. Another thing that is important is, of course, when you work, make sure that you work on the right things. This is something I've seen a lot with junior consultants I was mentoring. They try to boil the ocean, meaning they try to do all the potential analysis without even asking if it's needed. They try to do important analysis, but maybe in a too granular way with too much complexity. So one thing you really need to learn early in your career is to figure out what matters and what doesn't matter. And at the beginning, I think the best thing you can do is just to get input on that from your project manager, from your team members, etc. And they can help you plan and prioritize, which is also the next point. Very important already early in your career, make sure you start to network, both within your teams, but also outside of your teams, because the bigger your network, the more mentors you have, the more you can ask for guidance, different perspectives and support. And this will also open up a lot of opportunities as you are going forward in your firm. The last thing I want to have in this section is manage your expectations. Some things you cannot influence, others you can. And I think this is just a general truth. If you're not happy with a certain situation and you cannot change it, your thoughts about that situation actually will also make the situation worse. So try to let go of what you cannot control and optimize things that you actually can control. And I think one thing here that is super crucial is the logistics that surround the project. For instance, the travel. So find a way that makes it easier for you to live with this particular lifestyle. Consulting, as you probably know, involves a lot of travel. The typical project, you will fly out Monday morning and you come back Thursday evening. And Monday morning flights are usually very early. So some colleagues, including myself, I was actually figuring out that if I always fly out Monday morning, the whole week sucked afterwards because I could never catch up on the sleep that I was missing. And Sunday evening was already kind of destroyed anyway because I had to get up super early on Monday morning. So one thing I found that worked for myself is I was flying out not Monday morning, but Sunday evening, which allowed me then to have a good night's sleep in a nice hotel, have good breakfast, go to the gym before the start of another stressful week. And this completely changed the outlook on the week, my energy levels at the beginning of the week and throughout the week. So those are small things, but they can have a big impact on how you manage your well-being. And this is, of course, very personal. If you prefer to fly out on Mondays, that's something you need to find out for yourself. But I just want to show you there's different things that you can influence. Now, all these things, of course, that I just mentioned, I touched upon only in a very slight manner, and they have an impact on everything, your performance, your well-being, your work-life balance. But going deeper into those, I think would completely be out of the scope of this workshop, because it also includes things such as how to communicate, how to build client relationships, how to properly set up analysis, prioritize, visualize your findings, all those sorts of things, which you will learn anyway on the job. It's just important to figure out where you should focus on and how to get better at it. And if you are interested, I'll show you at the end. I've actually written a book on the whole topic on how to create a sustainable career, but also how to perform well on the job, which goes much deeper into all of these topics. Now, let's move on to the immediate actions. What can you do right now, even if you're not a consultant yet, to improve your work-life balance? And I'm sure some of the things I'm going to talk about you have already heard before. And I would structure this into 3 levers. First, reduce your stress with certain techniques. Second, optimize your sleep. And lastly, manage your lifestyle. Let's start with the first one. The first one is find proven strategies for stress management. And all of the things I'm talking about here, you probably have heard before. It's nothing new. So I will not go into a lot of detail here. Just to just name them once, there's things such as meditation, there's breath work, physical activity, of course, nature therapy, spending time in nature, going outside, and lastly, mindful eating. And the goal with this slide here is not that you should do everything, because then at the end of the day, you're making your life more complex, but to find 1 or 2 things that you can employ consistently, because the benefits with these things always lie in consistency. If you meditate once, you will not feel any impact. You might actually be more stressed afterwards because your mind was racing all the time. But if you meditate 2 months every day in a row for 10 minutes, I can guarantee you the positive impact. One topic that I really like, or one technique, is actually breath work, because this, unlike meditation, has an immediate impact. There's a couple of videos on YouTube on alkaline breathing, fire breathing, etc. And this immediately changes your physiology and you feel more focused, more relaxed, rejuvenated. So if you're looking for a quick fix, breath work could be a way out. The other 3, physical activity, of course, important. So don't just sit around 4 or 5 days a week, but try to do some workouts in between as well and ask for them. At the client side, try to ask for standing desks if they're available, or in your office. This also will make a big difference. And opt for walking instead of taxing. So if the client office is only 15 minutes by walk from the hotel, which often is the case, don't take the cab in the morning, but actually walk. You will feel much, much better. The same is true with going outside during the day. Not every meeting needs to be spent in a room. You can just have walking meetings, which also usually have better outcomes in terms of the ideas that you think of. If you're brainstorming, if you're thinking about a storyline for a client document, walking outside can improve this as well. And lastly, opt for nutritious foods. I can't stress this enough because you will work a lot, you will sit a lot, and sometimes, depending on your location, you might be at the end of the world where there's no good food options. And for this, you should prepare for and potentially even bring your own food, because a thing that is very common in the top firms is that people actually gain a couple of kilograms because of the sitting, no movement, and then on top having stress eating or eating the non-healthy food options on site. Some firms actually, for instance, McKinsey, they have you can order vegetables and fruit every week to the team room. So if your company offers that, I would also strive to take advantage of this offer, because it can help you have healthy snacks instead of unhealthy meals. The next thing, sleep. Sleep is very important. Everyone knows that. I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but I still want to talk about it because consultants usually neglect their sleep a lot. And to a certain degree, you can't really influence that, because if you're working every day until 11, 12 at night, of course, your sleep will suffer. But there's still a couple of things that you can do to improve. And the first thing that I think is important is stick to a consistent sleep-wake routine, not just during the week, but also on weekends. So don't go crazy on the weekends if you had a rough week, but try to stick to consistency here. Another thing that's important and a game changer for me was to prioritize your evening schedule to make sure you get some downtime before you sleep. One thing that often happens is you really work on an important slide, you close your laptop, and then you go to bed. And then your mind is still racing because you had no downtime at all. And a key trick here is really go back to what I mentioned earlier, prioritizing. Is the analysis or the slide really needed early on the next day? Is it mission critical or not? If not, which often it is actually not, you can just skip it and don't work on it past 10 p.m. If it's critical and you need it for the next day, of course, then you need to do it. But I can guarantee you, you can cut at least 50% of the work time after 10 p.m. if you apply this prioritization. There's also a lot of other things you can do. Probably no need to go deeper into that, but don't just close your laptop and look on your phone and then go to bed, but have some relaxing activities, meditation, reading a book, not on a screen, ideally before sleep. Make sure that the hotel room is dark, it's cold, the environment is conducive to sleep, essentially. And limit your caffeine intake, especially in the afternoon, because this is not just bad for your sleep, but you usually will be stressed anyway, and adding more caffeine is just adding fuel to the fire, actually. One other thing that helps, based on some research, is get sunlight early in the day. This keeps your circadian rhythms up and makes sure that you will be sleepy in the evening when you need to sleep. And you can combine these things. So you could just walk to the client office, get your sunlight early, and then you can cross that off the list as well. Now, the last thing in the short-term section I want to talk about is how you can actively build your lifestyle and the expectations. And one thing that is super critical here, and that a lot of junior consultants don't really know or understand, is that they can state their preferences. So preferences related to when they want to be available for calls, when they actually want to work from the team room, the hotel, or from home, when they want to eat, when they want to exercise. These are all things that you can discuss with your project manager, with your team. And usually at the beginning of a new project, that's something that needs to happen, this discussion. So you will probably not be able to optimize for everything, but pick maybe one or two items that you think are crucial for you, such as you always want to have a workout at 7 p.m. Of course, you will probably work afterwards, but 7 p.m. to 7:30 is the time you go running. Or you always need to have lunch at, I don't know, 12:30, because otherwise you go mad. I don't know, but those things are possible, and you should push for them. Of course, push for one or two and not everything. Pick the most important ones. And related to this is, of course, regularly review this, because one thing that can happen is you set your ambitions, you set your goals, and then after 2 stressful weeks, these goals have completely eroded and you're not even thinking about them anymore. So really important to always take stock. Am I still sticking to my lifestyle requirements, or am I constantly yielding to other demands? And then if you're doing that, adjust it. Again, seek the discussion and improve it. Another thing that is important in the short term, what I found very, very important, is to celebrate achievements and successes. The way you work usually in a typical project, you have a lot of milestones. You have a milestone every week, essentially, some bigger, some smaller. And once one milestone or success is achieved, you automatically move on to the next one without even thinking what you have achieved so far. So celebrate those things. Either you organize something or you ask others to organize it in your team. Show appreciation for what the team has done. Go for a quick team dinner, go for a quick team event. Just being outside with the team, outside of the team room and not just working, is good for bonding, it's good for relaxation. And usually if you do that regularly, your performance will also be better. So it's a win-win situation. So get out of the tunnel vision in a nutshell. The third thing on this page here, what I wrote down, is try to stay connected and don't just neglect your normal life. So the life aspect of the work-life balance, because once you're in a project, you're usually away from home, you're again in this tunnel vision and you might disconnect from everything. So don't do that. Keep in touch with friends and family throughout the week, have short calls, text them, ask them about their day, all those normal things, don't neglect them. And at the same time, make sure you have a couple of hobbies and something you can look forward to on the weekend, because it can easily happen that you have a super stressful week and you're in this tunnel vision mode and you come home Friday evening and you have nothing planned for the weekend. And then you sit around and wondering, okay, maybe I should have organized something earlier. So the weekend is over and you're back at work without having a proper change of pace. So yeah, plan things ahead, have hobbies, etc. And of course, on the weekends, fully disconnect. Don't look at your phone unless you expect something super urgent to come up, which is 99% of the time not the case. The last thing here on this page is embrace workplace flexibility. And what I mean by that is, since you're working on a project scope and you're usually not working from your home office, you can leverage some of this flexibility because your team members will likely not be from the same office as you are. So for instance, on Fridays, you don't need to go into your local office, but you can just work from home. So this is something that would allow you to wake up a bit later, or maybe do some sports before work. So optimizing all these like small things at the end of a day, at the beginning of a day can help. And this is especially true on Friday. So try to wrap up the work really early whenever it's possible. And I would say on Friday, there's the biggest impact here, because if you work 60 hours a week or even more, every hour that you don't work becomes more and more valuable. So if you can make that happen on a Friday and leave the office at 4 p.m. instead of 5 p.m., this hour will help you a lot, especially if it happens like week after week after week. So try to make that happen, prioritize the tasks. And again, think, is this really needed on Monday morning? If not, then leave it be. So these are all the short-term things. Now let's get a bit into the future planning. How can you make a sustainable career in the longer term? And I think two things are crucial here. The first is making sure you select the right projects. And lastly, finding the right balance. Now, selecting the right project is important for a couple of reasons. And I think the biggest reason is just that what you're working on, who you're working with, where you're working has huge impact on the hours, on your energy levels, etc. And what you need to figure out is, how does the staffing model work in your firm? Who are the decision makers? Are you expected to proactively seek for opportunities, or are you just expected to accept them or neglect them? It's something you need to figure out. And what's important here is to also figure out what types of projects you would enjoy working on, because if you have passion for something, you're interested in something, automatically your energy levels will be higher, you will be more interested, and negative aspects of the project will have less of an impact on you. And when you select projects, I think there's a couple of things that you need to think about and trade off and optimize for what's important for you. Now let's go into each briefly here. So I wrote down industry and focus. So I mentioned that try to work on projects where you're either interested in the industry or in the focus of the project. So for instance, strategy, development, operations, pricing, etc. The team dynamics are important. So always make sure that the team is properly sized, that there's people on there you enjoy working with or you have heard good things about, and that the leadership team has a style that you also would be willing to work with. How to figure it out, we'll get to in a second. But this is very, very important. So since the price tag of the top tier firms is usually very high, they try, or they tend to understaff sometimes, meaning there's more work than people on a team, which of course makes it very difficult. So the next thing you need to figure out is your preferences related to location and travel. Do you enjoy traveling? Do you enjoy traveling far away? Or do you want to stay close to your home office? Something that you should think about, and this can have a huge impact on your energy levels, work-life balance, because the standard project, if you're out of town, is usually Mondays to Thursdays, as I mentioned. But there's also projects which are further away, where you only travel once a month and you stay there on the weekends as well. You might come back for a couple of days and then go back to the client side. But there's also projects where the client, for instance, has a couple of locations, production facilities, etc., which have you travel a lot. And I remember the worst two projects I did in terms of traveling. Once I had 4 flights a week for many weeks back to back, which was super tough because you also have to work, and travel takes a large chunk of your day. It's exhausting, it's draining. You know how it is, going to an airport, security queues, always arriving last minute to the airplane. Adds a lot of stress and takes time away. And I also had one project where I was doing twice 6 flights in a week, and this was really across continents. So I was spending more hours in the plane in some days or even weeks than I was actually at the client side. So I was flying one day, the next day, every day essentially. Yeah, not ideal, didn't happen too often. But if you see that there's a project with several locations, maybe deprioritize that if possible. The time frame is also an important thing that you should think about. So generally, the longer a project, the longer the project, the better the lifestyle on average, because the milestones, the timelines are spaced out more. If you have a strategy engagement and it is only 6 weeks long, you're already expected to have really tangible insights at the end of week 1. Whereas if you have some implementation project, which runs over 6 months, probably at the end of week 1, you will still have some leeway and more time to figure things out. The client relationship is important. Try to go for clients where there's a long-standing relationship, a good relationship. Issues often come with clients that are first-time clients or ex-consultants because they have high demands, etc. And lastly, think about the project scope. Is everything clearly defined? Are there clear deliverables? Or is it all a bit unclear and still not super well defined, because this could lead to scope creep, which has a negative impact, of course, on your lifestyle. Now, these are the things you should think about, and you will probably not be able to optimize for all of them, but think about maybe 2 or 3 that are important for you, and then pick those. And how can you figure out how an actual project looks like in terms of these dimensions? By properly conducting a due diligence. That's a process that is very normal in all consulting firms. It's almost like an internal job market. And let's say you are asked to go on a certain project. The first thing you should do is actually to figure out who is leading the project, who is the client, what's the scope, etc. And then start calling people who have worked with these people before and has worked with this client before, and ask really, really specific questions to really understand, is the time frame manageable? How is the team? Is it sized well? Is the leadership style okay? Is this someone people enjoy working with, etc.? And based on this information, you can then make very informed choices and decisions, and potentially stay away from super tough projects. The last thing that you need to think of when getting staffed or thinking about staffing is that you should stay cautious of vague promises or step-up opportunities, because this is usually projects which are quite tough. My toughest project in terms of logistics and everything else was such a step-up opportunity where I was actually staffed alone in the middle of nowhere and had to fly 4 times a week. So this was not an ideal setup. It's good for career trajectory, but for work-life balance, it's actually the worst. And then also what you need to recognize is that even projects which are labeled as relaxed, they have hidden demands, and even a simple project will have you work 55 hours a week plus travel. So relaxed, this is a bit, you have to be sure to understand what it means to be relaxed in consulting. It's still way more than a 9-to-5 job. The last thing here is one thing that is important for staffing is that you have strong relationships with the people, the decision makers, with the staffers, but also with the leadership group. If you're interested in a certain area, make sure that everyone knows you and you know them, because then a lot of the staffing will happen informally, where someone is contacting you or someone is recommending you to someone else. And this is usually the projects you want to work on. You don't want to work on the projects that are officially transmitted or officially requested, because this is usually the ones that could not find enough people through informal networks, which are very strong. And if that's the case, it's probably not a good project to be on, or maybe a leadership team to work with. Now, here a couple of truths also for the long term that you should think about, and that is starting with making sure that you rest. When you are sick, a lot of people in high pressure jobs, they feel like they cannot be replaced. They feel like they cannot take time for themselves if they don't feel well. But this can have a super, super negative impact in the long run. So always make sure you rest, you avoid travel, you don't visit the client, you don't visit the team room, you don't attend certain calls if you're sick. And if you feel like something's brewing, and maybe it could be something more serious, also seek early help. Might be psychologically, it might be physically, because it's always easier to treat something at an early stage than if it's a full-blown burnout, for instance. The other thing you can do in the long run is to use breaks strategically. So first thing, non-negotiable, take all the vacation days you have. Junior consultants often feel like if they take vacation, it's a sign of weakness. This is a bit different across geographies, but yeah, it's completely wrong. Take all the days you have. And on top of that, consider actually special firm programs. So for instance, McKinsey has a take time program, which allows you to take 2 or 3 months extra vacation every year, unpaid. But given the base salary is so high, it doesn't really make a difference. And I think, I don't have exact numbers, of course, but just from my peer group, I would say 80% of the people in the more junior levels were actually taking this extended breaks, which is great because you have then more vacation days than being in a 9-to-5 job, and this really helps you to slow down. Having 1 week off between 2 tough projects probably doesn't move the needle much, but having 1 month off on top of the normal vacation can really make a big difference and also make it more sustainable in the long run. And this would also allow you to pursue certain hobbies, go to certain destinations where you wanted to travel, etc., in a much more relaxed way. You could also use firm training programs as a strategic break. So all the firms usually offer a lot of training, and attending those is, of course, a nice change of pace, because trainings are usually interesting, normal work hours, good for socializing, for partying, and having a week of training every now and then also puts everything else in perspective. And you also learn a lot. So it's a win-win situation here. You could also embrace on the beach intervals. So on the beach, I'm sure you probably know that term, refers to a consultant who is not working on any billable project. So not staffed on a client project, but open for internal work. And the internal work could be knowledge, document creation, research, client proposals, etc. And the good thing about this is that usually the lifestyle is a bit more relaxed, lower hours, you can usually work from home, etc. And try to proactively schedule these intervals. So you can, for instance, if you know that your project is nearing the end, you have 1 more week or 2 more weeks, look out for some client development work, for instance, that you can do for a couple of days before starting your next project. This would give you also a welcome break. Now, in all of this, for the long run, what is important is to make sure that you guard against this compounding effect of consecutive stress. Going through one project that is super stressful, couple of weeks, less sleep, you probably, you will not notice it that much. But doing this again and again and again will have a huge impact, because you're getting used to this way of work. You have probably left all your requirements that we discussed earlier, your lifestyle requirements, at the door. And also people start to know you as this one person who is a super hard worker, who always answers emails super late at night or on the weekend, who's always going the extra mile, etc. And they will request you for certain projects. So it's kind of like a spiral, a cycle where you get pulled in. And there's usually no positive outcome. So try to really guard against this effect and this cycle, and regularly assess your stress levels and really take stock. How am I feeling right now? Because if you're in this tunnel vision week after week after week, you might not notice it. And at a certain point, it might be too late and you're either like burned out, or you feel like, okay, I have to leave this job now. I'm not enjoying it anymore, or my social relationships are struggling. So really, really make sure to constantly check on that proactively and say no. One tough project, say no to the next tough project. You don't want to be known as this pushover who is constantly working on the tough projects. At the end of the day, all of what I was saying now is very personal. So some people get away with sleeping 4 or 5 hours every night. If that's not an issue, that's good. And you might have other issues, but what is important is to figure out what your triggers are, what your stressors are, and optimize in these areas. Now, let's look at the last point I wanted to discuss, and that is, what can you do if there's a crisis? And the crisis can be different things, but usually related to a tough or several tough projects in a row. So the first thing you can do is adjust your engagement. Secondly, you could exit it. Or lastly, and this is something I will talk about because it's very important, even if it's difficult, try to extend your tenure in a smart way. Now, the first thing is adjusting your engagement. And what this refers to is what I mentioned in the last section. Make sure and recognize when a project becomes too demanding. So you really want to understand when you are at the verge of burning out, and really assess your habits, your stress management techniques, and be really aware of these patterns, because they can creep up on you, and before you know it, you don't feel good anymore. What can happen here as well is seeking mentorship and open conversations. So if a certain project is going in the wrong direction in terms of lifestyle, client relationships, etc., the first thing you should do is talk with the people that are involved. This could be your peers on the team, your manager, your leadership. You could also reach out to mentors within the firm that you're partnered up with. And my experience is that if a project is derailed in one way or another, there's usually some practical solutions that will be implemented. It will not fix the whole situation, but there could be things such as staffing another team member for 1 or 2 weeks, so you have a more analytical firepower, or adjusting the travel schedule. Small things which can have a big impact. So seek open discussions. And one other thing that is important here is double down on the beneficial habits. We all have this tendency that in difficult situations, we start running faster than getting slower. This is also something I often see in case interviews. So when people make mistakes or really feel not good about their performance, they actually start answering faster, running faster. And this is the exact opposite what you need to do. The more difficult the project, the more you need to think about things such as balanced eating, regular movement, resting, even if it's just on the weekends, to really counteract all those effects. And the last thing that you need to think about is a bit of a mindset shift. And that is one of the benefits that you have in consulting, is that no matter how tough a project is, it usually concludes. And this is often very quick, very soon. The projects are usually, 8 to 12 weeks long. So maybe it's just 4 more weeks. And then if you break it down into individual weeks, individual days, this can also change your perspective a bit. So every project concludes, think about that. And also, of course, if it's a difficult project, you will usually be rewarded well for it, which can help you in the short term. If this, of course, has a negative impact on your health, it's not negotiable that you do something about it. And that is the next thing you can do. So instead of adjusting your engagement, you can also withdraw from a project. And how you can do that is first, of course, by understanding this will have an impact on your performance review, your career trajectory, at least in the short term, unless there's some health-related concerns. How should you do it? Keep everyone involved and informed. You want to make sure that everyone knows about your current status, your motivation to leave. And one thing that you can highlight here is that, for instance, it's more about the collective goal of serving the client well than just you dropping out because you don't want to work there anymore. So highlight how someone that is new on the team could potentially bring new energy, new insights, etc. One way to withdraw from the project could also be to just reduce your role. So instead of leaving right away, you could leave earlier than you initially planned, or you only spend a couple of days with the team, adjust your travel commitments, etc. And the last thing that I was writing down here is how you can exit a project strategically is a bit of a stretch, but sometimes it could work. And that is by really using your network. So what I mean by that is, let's say you don't want to work on a project anymore for whatever reason. Reach out to a partner you know, who you have worked with in the past, who thinks you're great to work with and holds you in high esteem, and ask if this particular partner has any project to start. And if yes, it could happen. It could happen that they pull you on their project, and then they have to negotiate with your current team and current leadership, and essentially find someone else that will replace you. And that way, you could essentially leave your current project, move to a new one, and without having any bad blood left behind. It's a bit of a stretch, but it can work in certain situations. The last thing in this section that I want to talk about is trying to maximize your career benefits by staying a bit longer. Even if you feel like you want to leave or you can do this for a certain amount of time, I would always urge everyone in this industry to stay in for at least 2 years, because after 2 years is usually when the benefits come. After 2 years, the headhunters start reaching out. After 2 years, the opportunities pop up on LinkedIn, etc. Big salary increases in industry companies, etc. So try to get to the 2-year mark. And there's a couple of ways on how you can achieve that. The first is referring back to these extra time off programs. So if you take in 2 years, 2 to 3 months extra vacation, you end up with only 16, 17, 18 months net employment. So a good manageable chunks, always 3 months work, some time off, 3 months work, sometimes off, some months off, or some weeks off. Adjust your perspective. If you only want to stay in consulting as a career booster and use it as a springboard, you don't need to say yes to every opportunity. Push back against unreasonable requests, weekend work, etc. Tough projects. If you want to stay there 2 years, no one actually cares. The weekends I already discussed earlier. Make sure you use weekends properly. Select projects wisely. We also discussed. Maybe 2 more interesting ideas though, which are new, is try to space out your assignments, your engagements and projects. And how can you do that? Not just by taking vacation, but you can also create downtime for yourself. And how? It's pretty simple. If you know that a project is ending in 1 or 2 weeks, put vacation strategically 1 or 2 weeks after the project ends. Why? You will not be staffed for 1 or 2 weeks on a new project. And this gives you some time likely for beach work, where you will work from your home office or from home, more relaxed hours. So on top of taking vacation, you've also bought yourself some time on the beach by strategically placing this vacation. So that's one thing you can do. And the second thing that you can do is figure out if there's some firm-specific programs. A lot of firms try to become more flexible for their employees. So there might be some part-time work arrangement, 4 days a week arrangements, etc. So combining these things with the mindset and with the perspective that you're using it as a springboard, I would say it should be possible for everyone to at least stay in the industry for 2 years and reap the full benefits. Because likely you've worked very hard to get into your firm in the first place. You work very hard in your firm. So it would be good to reap all these benefits as well that you earned for yourself. Now, this actually ends the presentation, and I'll do a quick summary and maybe provide my own perspective. Everyone at the end of the day needs to ask themselves, is it worth it? And this is very, very personal. I always argue it is worth it because the benefits, at least in the short term, significantly outweigh the drawbacks for most people, I would say. You learn a lot, you have exciting projects, you work with amazing people. If travel is your thing, best job. If you want to have an impact at the very early stage in your career, all those things, huge advantages. Also the exit opportunities that come with it, etc. The downsides were pretty much covered in this document. So at the end of the day, as I mentioned, you need to figure it out for yourself. But I would say, having talked to many people in this topic, both while in consulting, now with my clients, everyone, 95% is happy with their decision to get into consulting. And actually, most people stay longer than they initially planned to stay, because it's also, in a way, once you're in, you don't want to get out that quickly either. I want to leave you with 4 pieces of advice now, just to summarize this all up. And all of those 4, I think, I learned very early in my career, and they had a big impact on how I approached it, and also probably had a big impact why I got out of the experience with a relatively good lifestyle, good work-life balance. Not ideal, but I only had, I think, a couple of challenging experiences, which were really stretching. Everything else, I think, was in line or even below expectations in terms of workload. So the first thing that you need to be aware of is that you need to prioritize yourself. You need to prioritize your requirements, because no one else will take care of you. There's always more work to be done. There's always one more analysis. If you will work on weekend, everyone is happy to push work to you, but you need to stand up for yourself. You need to choose your battles and say no. And this is usually very well accepted. It's just important that you do it. Second thing is, consulting is a marathon. So it's something that you need to be in for the longer term. Even 2 years is long. It's not a sprint. So don't kill yourself for any short-term opportunities that completely burn you out, or several short-term opportunities, because the outcome usually is worse than if you also prioritize your work-life balance. The third thing is, find areas you like to work on and find people you like to work with. This can have a huge impact. If you really enjoy the projects, the topics, the people you work with, your energy levels will automatically be very different. You will create great friendships, great bonds in the team room that last usually a lifetime. So cherish this and focus on this as well. The last thing here is, make sure to celebrate achievements, and also be grateful to the people who supported you, and look back, because we all have the tendency to always look out in the front and see what's the next thing I need to do. What's the next thing I need to do? But actually, if you made it into one of the top consulting firms, you can be super proud of what you already have achieved. So every now and then, reflect and look back and see how far you already have come. This is super important. Also very important for your perspective overall, and potentially alleviate some of the stress of constantly thinking about the next thing you need to do. Good. I'm gonna wrap this up. As I mentioned, I'm curious to understand from you how you are dealing with work-life balance issues in your current situation. Is there anything that I've missed that you want me to clarify on? Any question really, not just related, of course, to sustaining and thriving in the career, but also maybe case interviews. Feel free to DM me on PrepLounge. Now, with that, I want to quickly talk about a book I wrote on the topic. Most of the content we discussed today is from this book, and the book has 2 goals. First goal is figuring out if consulting is actually the right job for you. And the second goal is, if yes, when you get the offer, figure out how to pick the best offer, how to start off strong, how to create a sustainable career. So I'm going really into all the details here with data analysis, presentation skills, relationship building, etc. And also I'm ending it with how can you exit the industry if you want to leave in an elegant manner, or if you're an intern, how can you convert your internship into a full-time role. The book is called Consulting Career Secrets, and covers all these points and a lot more that you would need to know if you want to be really successful in this industry. And with that, I thank you a lot for your attention today. And yeah, I want to leave you with making sure that you really take care of yourself, because it is a super rewarding industry, but at the same time, it is very demanding, and it comes with a couple of risks. Thank you very much.